This is some of the richest farmland on the planet. The Argentine pampas, grass, so good you can raise cattle on it without even trying, soil that feeds grain and beef to half the world. 100 years ago, the people who owned this land were richer per person than most of Western Europe. Argentina was supposed to become the United States of the South. So here's the part that stops you. This country has defaulted on its debt roughly 9 times. 3 of those in just the last 20 years. And in 2024, its inflation rate hit 220%. Same land, same talent, and it keeps breaking. This video is about the machine underneath, the one that keeps breaking it. Start with that inflation number, because it is not a typo. In 2018, Argentine prices were rising about 34% a year, already brutal by any normal standard. Then it climbed 72% in 2022, 133% in 2023, 220% in 2024. That means a loaf of bread that cost you 100 pesos at the start of the year cost more than 300 by the end of it. Your salary, your savings, your pension, all melting in real time. And this is not a one-off shock. Argentina has lived with inflation like this, on and off, for 50 years. So the real question is not what happened in 2024. It's why this keeps happening. To feel how strange this is, look at what Argentina actually has. It is one of the great food exporters on earth: soy, corn, wheat, beef. It sits on some of the largest lithium reserves in the world, the metal that powers electric car batteries. It has huge shale oil and gas fields. And it has an educated, urban population that produced Nobel laureates and world-class scientists. On raw endowment, this is a rich country. In 1913, economic historians rank Argentina among the 10 richest nations in the world per person, ahead of France, ahead of Germany. The ingredients for wealth are all here. They have been here the whole time. That's what makes the breaking so hard to explain. Now put the growth on a chart, and the pattern jumps out at you. This is Argentina's economy, year by year. Look at it. It doesn't grow steadily and then trip once. It lurches up hard, then off a cliff again and again. In 2002, at the bottom of its worst crisis, the economy shrank almost 11% in a single year. In 2020, it shrank nearly 10%. Deep collapse, partial recovery, deep collapse. This is the tell. A single bad year is a crisis. This rhythm is a machine. Something in how the country is run reliably produces the same failure decade after decade. So let's take it apart and see the moving parts. The clearest look at the machine is the crash of 2001. For years, Argentina had pegged its peso 1-to-1 to the US dollar to kill inflation. It worked until the government kept spending and borrowing dollars it did not earn. When the money ran out, the whole thing came apart in weeks. To stop people from emptying the banks, the government froze the accounts. The famous corralito, a limit of 250 pesos a week, your own money locked away behind the glass. The streets filled. The president fled by helicopter. And then Argentina defaulted on more than $100 billion of debt, the largest sovereign default the world had ever seen at that point. This is what the bottom of the cliff actually looks like. So here is the machine itself, in 3 moving parts, because it really is this simple and this repetitive. Part 1. The government spends more than it collects in taxes, year after year, a chronic deficit. Part 2. Because almost no one will lend to a serial defaulter at a same price. It covers the gap by printing pesos or piling on short-term debt. Part 3. All those new pesos make the currency worth less. Prices explode, the debt becomes impossible, and the country devalues or defaults, which wipes the slate and lets the whole cycle start again. Deficit, print, devalue, default. Round and round. Every Argentine crisis you can name is some version of the same loop. The names of the presidents change. The machine does not. And it does repeat, even when the cause looks completely different. In 2014, Argentina actually had the money to pay and defaulted anyway. A U.S. court ruled it could not pay the creditors who had accepted a restructuring unless it also paid a handful of holdout hedge funds that had been fighting for a decade. Argentina refused, the payment was blocked, and it tripped into what's called a selective default, number 8. Then in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, it defaulted again, number 9. Different trigger every time, a currency peg, a courtroom, a virus. Same outcome. That is the signature of a machine rather than bad luck. Bad luck doesn't rhyme this precisely. Here is the cost of all this, and it's the chart that should sting the most. This is income per person, adjusted for what money actually buys for Argentina and for its quiet neighbor across the mountains, Chile. Go back a few decades and Argentina was clearly ahead, richer, bigger, prouder. Chile was the smaller cousin. But Chile did something Argentina never managed. It stopped breaking. Steady rules, an independent central bank, boring, predictable policy. And somewhere in the last decade, the lines crossed. By 2023, the average person in Chile was better off than the average person in Argentina, around $29,600 against Argentina's $27,000. The neighbor with fewer natural gifts simply stopped setting the machine off. That gap is the price of the rhythm. There is one more part of the machine, and it's the one everyone argues about, the lender of last resort. When Argentina breaks, the International Monetary Fund tends to step in. In 2018, it handed Argentina $57 billion, the single largest loan in the fund's history. Argentina still ended up defaulting 2 years later. And in 2025, the IMF signed off on yet another program, around $20 billion. By one count, that is the 23rd IMF arrangement for Argentina since 1956. Read that again. 23 rescues. Because each bailout keeps the machine alive without fixing the deficit at its heart. The very first moving part. The loan doesn't end the loop. It just funds the next turn of it. You can see the strain in the debt itself. This is Argentina's government debt as a share of its whole economy. Notice it doesn't just climb, it whips around violently because the number is measured in pesos and the peso keeps collapsing. In 2023, it spiked past 150% of the economy as the currency cratered, then lurched back down after a giant devaluation reset the math. A stable country's debt line drifts. Argentina's convulses. Even the debt chart moves to the rhythm of the machine, which tells you the problem was never really the debt. The debt is a symptom. The machine is the disease. So step back and separate two things that Argentina constantly blurs together. There is the stock, the wealth the country already holds. The land, the grain, the beef, the lithium under the ground, the talent of its people. That stock is enormous. And it has survived every crisis intact. The pampas did not stop being fertile. And then there is the flow, the new value the economy is supposed to create and keep each year. That is what the machine destroys. Every deficit, every burst of printing, every default takes a slice of the flow and burns it so the wealth never compounds. Argentina is not a poor country. It is a rich country that refuses to let its wealth accumulate, a fortune run through a shredder 1 decade at a time. A country can be handed almost everything, the land, the resources, the people, and still stay poor at the level that counts, if the machine underneath keeps resetting the score to 0. Argentina's tragedy was never a lack of wealth. It was never letting the wealth stand still long enough to grow. If you want more of the systems that quietly decide whether a country gets rich or stays stuck, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.